I am honored to welcome you to the Athletic Lives and Balance podcast. Working title, but that's what I'm going with right now. My name is Akavicki. I'll be hosting this thing. I have been in the fitness industry for about 15 years now. I work and I help and specialize in helping athletic parents and working professionals to lose weight, maximize their body composition, regain confidence, and boost their energy levels. And I am very, very happy to have my good friend and one of the best physical therapists I know here in here today as my first guest and my first episode, Ramez Antoun. I'm gonna let you do your own little elevator speech and explain kind of what you're doing these days. But I've known Ramez for shit. When did we start college?
Yeah,
2006.
feels like decades ago, really.
I mean, it almost is now. We're 17 years or so.
Yeah,
But we actually didn't really meet until about sophomore. I wouldn't say meet, but actually start hanging out until about sophomore. Or was it sophomore or junior year when we did that night physics class and we started carpooling together?
yeah. That
Um,
I think that was sophomore year, actually.
yeah, so that's when we actually kind of first started hanging. We started
What
getting
was
more
what
into
was
the
my history
exercise.
professor's name again? Sorry to take this way tangential, but he was the man,
He was the man. Was it Doyle?
Dr. Doyle or
Dr.
Mr.
Doyle,
Doyle.
yeah. I think that was it. He was the shit. He
Don't be a bad,
made
be a bad doobie.
yeah, exactly. He made night physics as enjoyable as it could be. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
we definitely do it now.
So, but yeah, that's when you and I met, both studying exercise physiology. Beyond that, you went into physical therapy. I headed into strength conditioning, and that has translated more into me doing general fitness nowadays. Kind of crossed with strength conditioning too. That's always going to kind of be like the underlying theme of like my training, and kind of my
Well,
philosophy that there's an
that's where we both really started off is in the strength and conditioning world, right? Like we nerded out in college with like strength and conditioning. You did a sick internship, I did a sick internship, and then like we started like working out at Costello Gym. Remember that? Where like the athletes train.
yeah,
We were just like that's where we sparked both of our passions. I feel like.
yeah. For me, that was the class that did it. Was that exercise prescription and programming class with Professor McDermott,
Yeah,
and that was like the class that I probably took the best notes of any class in my college career because I was just like fascinated by it.
that was the
So
peak course of undergrad for sure.
yeah, that's kind of where we started. Yeah, and at this point now, I'll let you get into what you're doing. I know, obviously, you're practicing physical therapist, but you're switched more into kind of the education side of things within physical therapy. But why don't I hand it over to you now? We kind of explained how we met, where we came from. But what are you doing nowadays?
So yeah, where we came from was strength and conditioning, and then yeah, I went the physical therapy route. I fell in love with orthopedic physical therapy, but also neuromuscular physical therapy in PT school. And then from there, went off to California, studied a whole different system of just like neurological therapy with like post stroke and post brain injuries, spinal cord injuries. Uh, Came back, did a fellowship in orthopedic uh, physical therapy, and then just along the way, I've just always loved strength conditioning. I just kept up with that. I trained myself. Um, and I basically, long story short, got into the private sector of physical therapy. So now I work with and partner with a company called Barbell Therapy and Performance, where we see active adults and athletes basically doing sports rehab. A lot of powerlifters, weightlifters, martial artists, runners, really just competitive people. And then, like you mentioned, Spine PT University is basically right now, an online continuing education platform for physical therapists. So it's basically like spine therapy education for PTs. And that's where we're at now. So you know, I have a niche. I have a niche. I have a passion for teaching in various different levels, both like direct to consumer, but then also talking nerd shop to right to the professional, whether it be a PT or strength coach. So those two business avenues are just reasons for me to scratch both of those itches.
That makes sense. That's not too shocking either, because in college you were always the dude explaining stuff to other people. So that's not
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I've always loved it and always done it naturally. Yeah.
yeah, right on, man. Um, I gotta ask this question because I know how passionate you are about this particular movement. So my big question is: have you ever actually programmed twerk as a movement in one of your workouts?
Uh, for a patient or for myself?
I guess both. I mean, hell, have you done it for both?
So for a patient, no. For myself, I have to say no. But now you're making me think about it and how to like
Hey,
prescribe the volumes and loads appropriate for said exercise.
can you explain your passion behind that particular movement?
The twerk, I think it.
Yeah.
So I'll go like super nerdy talk, and then I'll go super layman's term talk. The twerk is an unbelievable ability or expression of demonstrating fine control in the spine, and the health of our joints depend on whether they can move or not, or demonstrate control or not, because the synovial fluid within the joint the joint surfaces, the only way they get nutrients is through movement. They don't have their own blood supply. So the
Mhm.
ability to twerk at various levels of the spine is an expression of spine health, in my opinion. And actually, it's not just my opinion; it's essentially fact too. Because when you look at being able to control your pelvis, aka twerk, and do a anterior posterior pelvic tilt, right? Um, when you start to study pain, you realize that pain alters the control of our muscles. So, like after I have hand pain, when I try to move my thumb, I accidentally move my pinky. Well, that's what a lot of people will do after back pain. They'll try to tilt their pelvis and they'll like bend their knee. A lot of people who've been
Mm.
coaching movement for a while will see that. It's like, no, dude, what are you doing? That's your knees, right? And I'm not making fun of
Mhm.
anyone. It's natural. Pain alters
Sure.
muscle control. So I think the twerk is really important because if you can control that area, you can demonstrate health to that area. And then you can also get yourself out of back pain quicker if you can control that area. So long live the twerk.
Makes sense. Heard it here first, folks. Twerk for your own spinal health.
And it's a
um,
great dance battle tool, I have to say.
yeah, I mean the hips don't lie, and
Put a lot of people up
you
when
know,
they can't twerk like you.
um, I'm not shocked you took some passion to that one. That actually brings me into like kind of like what I've been dealing with the last few months, because I think we talked like a month or two ago. At the time, I'm pretty much on the other side of it, but I was dealing with arguably like the most frustrating minor injury of my entire life, which was like a minor QL strain on my left side. And I kept telling everyone like it's such a weird injury because it's been minor in that like it hasn't really affected my activities of daily living. Like I'm able to walk, I'm walking my dog around, like I'm not living in chronic pain, but it impacted my training from a performance standpoint. Like I couldn't do anything I'm used to. I couldn't rotate. I couldn't lift heavy. So it was like super, super, super frustrating. Even more than like, like I've badly, badly sprained my ankles in the past. And it was more frustrating than those, because those ones, like, it sounds weird, but they almost like made sense, if that makes sense. Like you could see the swelling, you could see the damage. And it's like, all right, yeah, I'm hurt. Versus like a QL injury, you can't see it and you can't figure out why it's happening, but it just won't go away. But I guess that segues into like, I guess one of my questions, because my goal with this, with you as my guest, is to kind of talk about like the parallels between fitness, strength conditioning, and physical therapy. Because again, like my avatar is, um, like athletic parents, working professionals who all want to get healthier. But obviously, the older we get, I think a lot of people are pretty interested because we've all dealt with probably a minor back strain at some point. But you might not necessarily have a specific answer for this, but like I guess discussing strategies of how people can better mitigate or deal with back pain.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you know what? The question or the answer is different depending on who we're talking to. So, for example, if I was talking
Sure.
directly to your pain point, like you're someone who's meeting the weekly physical activity requirements by the CDC, right? So it's like
Hmm.
150 minutes of moderately intense exercise, uh, resistance training twice a week, and then just minimizing prolonged static postures. Like those are like your three check.
Hmm.
So like people who make that cut versus people who don't make that cut are going to get two very
Hmm.
different answers, right? So the people who aren't meeting those requirements, I'm going to think to myself like, well, what's the quickest way we can hit those three boxes as quickly as possible? That would be number one. To review those three, it's resistance training twice a week, 150 minutes per week of mild to moderately intense exercise. And then
Hmm.
three, minimizing sustained, prolonged static postures.
Like sitting all
So
day.
yeah, so it's so someone like you, you're above that cut, right? So
Sure.
my answer to you is, um, in terms of mitigating future issues, is having some type of a sense of what your weekly volumes and loads are in terms of what you're doing for exercise. Now that can be as little as like if someone's doing a strength conditioning program, I want to be able to look back at your program and see what were the volumes and loads that you were hitting in the last 8 weeks, if we're being serious about the strength conditioning program, right?
Sure.
And just bring as much objectivity to that as possible. And then looking without doing like a movement screen or a full on assessment like we've done virtually in the past during COVID. Remember that? Is
Hmm.
I don't have any movement profile on the person and how they're moving. I'm going to try to at least start there. And then, so that's for the really active person hitting the three guidelines of physical activity guidelines. And then for the person who's not, then we're going to try to hit those guidelines. Because if you look like, I get this question a lot, and the best answer we can get is by looking at the blue zones. This is areas around the world that have a lot of
Hmm.
centenarians, people who live over
Yep.
100. And if we reverse engineer their lifestyle habits, we'll get a lot of answers to a lot of these musculoskeletal pain issues, right? It's when you
Yeah.
study these people and what they do physically, they're doing something physical daily, weekly, and they don't go
Yeah.
through these acute spikes of completely dropping off of physical activity and then all of a sudden just emotionally coming back with a vengeance with these. Like they just have this
Hmm.
sustained habit of physical exertion, right?
Sure.
And it's a very, and then you go, you study the way some Eastern martial arts gyms or dojos progress people through the belt system, right? White belt to black belt, and how many years they spend acquiring these skills and developing resilience to stress and training, and how slowly the progression actually is. And then you look at Northern America and how we progress exercise sometimes, and it's like, oh, you've never exercised before? Let's go do 100 kettlebell swings with a 16 kilo. Like, what? You don't even know how to hip hinge, bro. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? So it's like if we could have a belt system for exercise, right? If people actually want to get into that, there needs to be like, okay, here's a white belt level drill. Here's a yellow belt level drill. Here's an orange belt yellow drill. You know what I mean? And like
Mm.
there's this and the for doing plank variations, there's a progression there. For doing deadlift variation, there's a progression there.
Sure.
I kind of just went off. Did I answer your original question?
You did. It was exactly the kind of the answer I was expecting. Because honestly, like most things within physical training, exercise, health, fitness, like the answer is always like it depends, right? Who
Yeah.
am I working with? Like, what's their situation? So, like, bringing up my point and what you would look at in the past, in terms of like what was my volume, what was my load. That's exactly where I went wrong, and that's why I got hurt. It's because I was being an athlete. I was being a jackass with my like the volume was there. It was laid out for me. Like, do this amount of reps at this weight. It was like my fifth week of doing this particular workout. And I don't know if it's because I drank too much coffee before, but I was just feeling strong AF. And I was like, you know what? I'm loading it up like an extra like 20 pounds. And on top of that, I hadn't been doing glute ham raises, and I added those into that same workout that day. And I didn't notice it when it happened, but then that same day, Kimmy and I went to like a concert, and I was just on my feet for the whole day, just standing, and I think it just fried my QL. Versus like what you said, where we have this, and this is actually going to segue me into a kind of another topic I want to talk about
Wait,
with you. But
can I just double click on that real quick?
what's
I
that?
just, I just want to elaborate on something you said. So like
Yeah,
I went to a recent course where, what you did at first, because I've done that before too, right? You're feeling good, right? You're feeling
yeah,
strong. You want to load up, you want to push yourself, you want to push your limits, you want to see what you're capable of. I think as athletes and as people who want to continue to challenge themselves, if you resonate with that persona,
mm-hmm.
feel skeletal pain, it's gonna come and it's gonna go, right? And
Sure,
it's not necessarily shaming and blaming ourselves. The fact that that you actually increased X percentage of load and this is why you got hurt versus thinking you have a degenerative disc are two totally different paradigms, right? Like
yeah,
you,
yeah,
you
absolutely,
knew the fault and you were able to learn that lesson and then you're better for it moving forward. And I think that right there is like how we can continue to just get healthier and make sure we acquire spine health as we go through the aging process, right? So it's like for me, it's knowing that musculoskeletal pain is going to come, it's going to go. Know how to look at some of these fundamental principles and checkpoints, so you don't, get into this like self-destructive or even like hopeless thinking patterns that we'll say
mm-hmm.
spine recovery. Um,
Sure,
be able to basically move forward with action points. So it's like I'm starting to rethink of it when I have those flares. Like I was beating the shit out of my Bob punching bunny, dummy last week,
Dummy,
right?
yeah, I gotcha.
And I got this like tricep like tendonitis like a couple days later because I was just hitting Bob like hard and I was getting after it, and I hadn't really gone after it like that in months.
Yeah,
And I was like, I don't know what this tricep like extension pain is. And then I kind of looked back at my program and I was like, oh yeah, I definitely laid into Bob that day. Right? I
fuck Bob
acquired
up.
this, yeah, I acquired this like tricep tendonitis, and like I think a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have gotten really upset with myself about that.
Sure.
Like now with this new like framework or this new perspective, I'm kind of just like, yeah, I got after it. I had suffered the consequence. I know how to rehab this thing, and let's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of move on and let's program this more intelligently moving forward. you know?
Yeah, yeah. Um, no, that I mean that honestly, it brings me to like a point I was going to make is that um, I was telling someone who I was talking about, I was like, the good thing is like it's been annoying. The good thing is it is musculoskeletal. It's not a disc injury, So I kept myself out of that mindset of like, oh, I have a bad back now. And that's just my life. You know what I mean? Like it was a musculoskeletal. It was obviously a muscular strain. Part of the reason it took so long to get over is still the athlete's mentality, where the first week or two after it happened, like, convinced myself, oh, I'm just sore. And then I was still like, I was doing it like hang cleans and deadlifts and everything. And then like, 7 to 10 days after, just be like, no, you're not sore. Like you're injured. It's time to slow things down. And then doing what I thought was slowing down, it wasn't enough. It just kept happening. So then I did this virtual physical therapist, and when I was working with her, she's like, no, like literally for like 2 weeks, like you're just walking and you're doing like side bends and back bends and just like very gentle range of motion stuff, and then we'll start progressing. So, but I think as an athlete, that's always the toughest thing, is just dialing it back to like those basics. And it's like I feel like I'm doing nothing. Like this is driving me crazy because my outlet is going around and going out there and jumping and throwing heavy weights around. So that's a really good point in terms of just because you hear that so often now. Number one, especially within the fitness industry and health, people act like they hit 30 years old and like they're over the
The
hill. And it's
world's gonna
just like,
end. Right? Yeah, it's like, are you
come
kidding
on,
me?
like look at some of the best athletes in the world, like Steph Curry, LeBron James. LeBron James is 38 years old, and look what the hell he's doing. So like, yeah, you're not broken. And then just that aspect of like, I have a bad back, I have a bad knees, things like that. It's like, well, do you, or just have you not appropriately like addressed like any issues and worked on them? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally.
So for me with this QL injury, it's been a very good learning experience because, not to get too like kinesiology nerdy, but like it highlighted some movement asymmetries that I had, and that's probably why I got hurt. So I just kind of learned a few things about that.
Well, my question always to that is, were the asymmetries there before the injury, and was it actually asymmetries, or if we had a more progressive volume or load progression, would that have even happened to begin with?
It's
Because
probably
there's
a
a lot of
combination.
there's a lot of new science out there that is really honing in on like, okay, we all have asymmetries. And then
Sure.
if the asymmetries, if it reaches a certain point where it's like, okay, you can only bring your leg up to 45 degrees on one side and then you're getting to 80 degrees on the other side. That type of asymmetry is like, okay, we need
Sure.
to address that, right? But the body is inherently asymmetrical, and there can be a lot of false positives with some of the movement testing if we get too nitty gritty about asymmetries. And I think addressing the asymmetries is definitely going to be huge, right? Like
Sure.
I think there's profound impact there. Um, but I think given that you found that I don't know if you did the percentages, but like what I found and what a lot of research suggests is if the volume increases by more than 10 to 20% weekly, that's where we're picking up on a lot of red flags, right? I don't know if so. I
Mm.
don't know if you did that math. I shared with you before, like how one of my relapses because I just deadlifted like an idiot after a
Yeah.
weekend of like going out and shit, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't swear on this podcast, right?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I'm trying to make this podcast
Absolutely.
authentic. So if you swear, you swear.
Oh yeah, when I did that
I
calculation after that weekend and how much I lifted compared to the previous week, it was like a 60% increase in load. I immediately
yeah.
turned to myself. I was like, Mez, you deserve this fucking pain.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know how to rehab this,
Yeah.
like starting up the next time. Next time after you go out for like, sushi drinks and get really bad sleep and you have 2 bouts of diarrhea the Monday morning, maybe that's not a good deadlift, right? Like, come on, bro.
At least not that heavy.
The
At least not
lessons
that
from,
heavy.
lessons from my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to honestly answer that question too, it's probably a combination of the two. Where I think it was Eric Cressy where he posted something once, and it was along the lines of like the point isn't to like remove asymmetries. Like we're looking to limit gross compensations, but you don't want to sit there and be hypercritical of movements because I worked with people like that before who are like I had a client once. She was like, "Is my pelvis like shifting laterally when I squat?" And like I watched her squat. I was like, "Honestly, like, is it bothering you?" She's like, "No." I was like, "You're being way too like hypercritical. Just squat. And if it's bothering you, then we'll
It
start to
looks,
like
yeah, it
break it
looks
down."
good, right?
So,
Well, hey,
um,
got a step further. I sorry to keep jumping in here, but like,
no,
I went through a lot of
go.
training in the FMS, and one of the biggest myths about the actual system of FMS is that we're trying to like correct all asymmetries. But in
Sure.
reality, if I have an athlete or a power lifter or a weightlifter that comes in like 2 to 4 weeks before a lift or before a competition or an event, if I find an asymmetry in that athlete, I am not addressing it before competition. Because in the FMS, one of the founders, Greg Rose, will say, like, if you're working with a competitive athlete, golfer, pitcher, and they have a very specific high performing role in their sport, if
Mhm.
they're not training hard enough and enough, and if they don't have an asymmetry, right? So there are actual inherent asymmetries that are specific to certain sports positions and feats of strength that are required to actually be at that level, right?
Mm.
So I think we need to really appreciate that, like, the goal is not also to just create these like perfectly symmetrical like moving statues with our clients.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
if you're attacking a certain event or a feat of strength, like there's certain asymmetries that people need, whether that's front, back, or left, right. You know, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's another rift on quote unquote asymmetries and imperfections.
Yeah. I mean, humans were imperfect. We're imperfect as it's natural. So from a movement standpoint, it's always going to be the same too. And honestly, like also, especially from an athletic perspective, um, every athlete's going to move in their own unique way, and sometimes that unique way is what makes them who they are. right?
100%.
Yeah.
I like to
Let's
say I'm a recovering perfectionist.
yeah, there you go. No, like I said with the QL, it was a learning experience because I knew about the minor asymmetries that I had, and kind of like you said, like it was probably a combination of that asymmetry mixed in with putting too much load into a particular exercise and too much volume increase. But not to get too technical, but like the biggest thing I noted was like on that side, the left side, like I had a lack of, as compared to my right, like internal rotation when I would do like a 90-90 hip sling or 90-90 hip flip with a row.
Yep.
I could get into the position and do it, but I realized like I was cranking my hip down and like, you know what I mean? Just like forcing myself into it versus like, I guess, keeping the posture I want. And I've noticed that as I've worked on it, that now I'm starting to be able to stay up a little more upright. I'm not like pushing my hip as much, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm on a tangent here.
No, it absolutely does. It's actually getting into that position. You need pretty good internal rotation on one side and external rotation in the hip on the other, so that
Yeah.
you're not forced to rob motion from your spine to be able to sit in that position comfortably without falling over like a leaning tower of Swiss cheese, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And the side where I bought, like where I hurt the back, that's where it was. And so I've been working on that. I'm on the other side now. Feeling much better, starting to feel like myself. I'm getting back. I'm actually doing a lot of the programs we did when we did my ankle rehab together a couple of years ago during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
SLDLs, like just pushing volume on that with not much load, and addressing those things.
Nice, dude.
Let's move into kind of, I mean, I would say the main discussion. I think we're already in it, but
I'm gonna add 2 points to like your previous questions. You said like
please
spine
do.
health. To add to those
Yeah.
buckets, spine health is like mobile hips
Mm-hmm.
and core endurance from
Mm.
like a capacity and a fitness standpoint. So the ability for the spine to resist flexion, extension, side bending, and rotation, like the anti-rotation
Yep.
movements of just classic fitness training, the core. Like the dare I say the functional approach to core training.
Yeah. That word is kind of lost its.
I know, but
I
people
don't know
know
what the
exactly
word I'm
what
looking for
I'm
is.
talking about, so I'm bringing it back.
Yeah. That actually segues into kind of what I wanted to go into is like exercise workout strategies. That brings kind of the core training because I train the core very similar to what you just talked about. Like it's rare that I'm having my clients do crunches unless like they're like, I like doing crunches. Like I want to try it and feel the ab burn. Like I'm doing pal off presses. I'm doing planks. I'm doing anti-extension, anti-flexion, side planks. And then a combination of like dynamic core control, whether that's med ball hip tosses and rotations, things like that. But as someone who's worked pretty extensively in outpatient PT as well as strength conditioning, what I guess like what are the workout and exercise strategies that you adhere to and then encourage your clients to get into?
When we're talking about core specific exercises,
Yeah, I suppose let's start there, or whether that like, or you could talk resistance training. But I guess given what your background is, especially with like low back pain, probably core is the best place to start. Because I mean, I get that question all the time. Like, what's the best core workout you can do? And I don't know if I ever have necessarily an answer because it's very rare that there's a best of anything. But
yeah, I get that question a lot as well. I've been starting to answer that question by giving a general framework versus specific exercises. So like if we just look at a basic programming template, and I basically acquired the strategy from Mike Boyle, but it's like, what are we going to do to warm up and create some type of like just increased body temperature? What are we going to do to address key areas of mobility? That's usually somewhere at the ankles, hips, or T-spine or thorax. And then we're going to go into a core circuit where we ask the core to resist movement for time. So, so trying to develop time under tension in anti-extension, anti-side bending, anti-rotation. And I'll use Stuart McGill's pyramid scheme of his big three, the McGill big three. You YouTube it, you'll find it, where it's basically we're doing pyramid sets of 10-second isometric holds.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing 6 10-second isometric holds on the first set. Then we're going to drop 2 reps and we're going to do 4 10-second isometric holds in the second set. We drop 2 sets and we do 2 10-second isometric sets. So the total time under tension of that entire block is a 2-minute hold. So if we're doing like a plank, a side plank, or a bird dog hold, the McGill Big Three, you've done a total time under tension of 2 minutes of that area. And I don't care how fit you are. I don't care how good in shape you are. I've taken power athletes. I've taken martial artists. I've taken people through these big 3 drills, which is super basic body weight. Just can you hold and breathe? And I'll get people on before we even hit. So 642 is actually the end goal, especially people coming out of back pain after we've removed triggers from their environment and looked at their mattress and their desk setup and make sure they're not sitting in a ridiculous position for hours and hours. Then we start diving into this kind of stuff and we see a ton of things start to illuminate themselves in terms of core endurance asymmetry. So for example, I had a power lifter like a few months ago. He was getting ready for a lift and he was deadlifting 400 or 500 pounds, but he could side plank for a minute on one side. And then by 20 seconds on the other side, he was breaking form and he was shaking like a dog.
Okay.
That's a good analogy, shaking like a dog. But it was just
scared dog.
So my narrative to that power lifter is dude, you can lift this much weight and you can do a minute on this side and 20 seconds on this side. Imagine how much weight you would be able to lift if you could do a side plank equal amount of time on both sides. And that's what we're seeing. The people who are just crushing performance, crushing anything that they want to do in terms of physical activity without the side effects of musculoskeletal pain, aka back pain, they're able to check these basic boxes of core endurance. So quick summary, we warmed up, we did a mobility circuit, hips, T-spine or ankles. Then we went into a core circuit, anti-extension, side bend and rotation. Can you do isometric holds? And then we're gonna get into our lift, where we're gonna push, pull, hinge, knee dominant, or carry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are our big buckets of lifting. So you can break the push pull into vertical push pull, right? Lat pull downs, pull ups, or overhead press, or horizontal push pull, basic bench push up, dumbbell row, TRX inverted row. And then we'll finish with some type of cardio, right? Some type of zone 2 or circuit training if we need to go there, depending on where they're at. So we have that. And when we have that template, now we can start to look at someone, let's say with back pain, and then we can just be like, which exercises in these categories best fit this person.
That makes sense.
The framework that I'll go into when I'm thinking about back pain. Your question was are there specific exercise strategies, right?
Yeah, I mean that definitely answers the question. I suppose for layman's terms, for people who might not be quite as versed in programming, what's the word I'm looking for? Language, I guess, is warm up.
Yep.
Don't neglect your mobility work.
Yep.
Make sure the core, the foundation is strong and can resist, because what you just said, isometrics, they suck. They're so fucking hard to do.
Endurance before strength.
Yeah, and build that up. And then I was having this discussion with someone a few weeks about, but talking about from the strength perspective, especially when you're talking general fitness, there's just about everyone you work with is going to benefit from a knee dominant, a hinge, a push, a pull, and a carry. You can pretty much lay that out for, honestly, anyone. You could take an athlete and just keep that framework right there and just push the threshold of their volume and obviously progressions of exercise. But that's a really good, that's basically the way I train all my clients. It sounds basic, but
it's very versatile.
Yeah, and most of my clients, regardless of like their level, like we're gonna do about 15 to 20 minutes of warm up, mobility work, some core engagement, and then honestly, like from the strength perspective, like it's very rare that I have a client who does more than 6 strength exercises in a given session. Usually it's 4. It's a hinge, it's a knee dominant, it's a push, it's a pull. We just
Well,
work
and
3 to 5 sets.
it all really depends on how much time they give you, right? Like one of the fundamental things I learned about coaching people and change is like, what if they only got 30 minutes or 20 minutes, right? Like sometimes they can get a ton of benefit from just like 2 strength moves. Like we're going to do a push pull
Sure.
on one day, and we're going to do a hinge and knee dominant on the other day, right? So we're going to do push ups and inverted rows, and then the other day we're going to do a reverse lunge, and we're going to do a hip hinge with a kettlebell or deadlift, whatever you want to
Sure.
call it. Right?
That's an interesting point too, because especially given that like since I've started the online training and now I've really like revamped it this past year, that's part of what I do for my clients is because like you said, when you're working in a, I hate to say it, but like the pay for time model, right? You got an hour with your trainer, right?
Yep.
Versus like when I work with a client, like we spend a lot of time in the beginning, like optimizing their routine for their lifestyle. And if that means they only have 30 minutes because they're, you know, a parent of 3 kids, they're working, and like, then that's what we're going to do. And like, subscribe to the anything is better than nothing aspect of things, right?
Yep. 100%. You know what's interesting? Actually, I was at a course recently that was talking about just longevity and health. And did you know like the health benefits and the ROI of time taking someone from 3,500 steps today to 5,000 steps a day, or even to 7 to 8,000 steps a day, is
Mm-hmm.
is more compounding than the ROI for someone who goes from like 10 to 12 or 12 to 15,000. It makes
I can see
sense,
that.
but it's like taking someone from completely not moving to just moving a little bit more,
Yeah.
right? Versus someone who's already moving enough, making them move more versus like looking at
Yeah.
recovery, rest, regen strategies if that's not what they're already doing. So it's like to your point, like if sometimes that constraint, I only got 20 or 30 minutes, is a
Yeah.
blessing. Because it's a lot of people don't need more stress in their life. Like they come to us with a shit
Yeah.
ton of stress already, right? And like the good trainer, the good coach is going to recognize that and know when they're dealing with an over recovered person or an over trained person.
Sure.
You
That
know?
that's kind of similar to um, weight loss and whatnot, because obviously, like we know the the dangers and like the cons of carrying like excess weight, right, on to a certain level. And there's the new movement, the health at any size movement, which some people have their issues with, whether it's glorifying, obesity. Like that's beyond the point. Like, because what research has shown that like most people they reap the health benefits of exercise and even nutrition within like the first 10 pounds of weight loss. Like it's
Mm.
just more or less like the implementation of that exercise that's going to help them from a health standpoint. So it's that balance of like the health, and it's kind of like what you're talking about right there. Like, you know, the single mother of 2 kids who's working, she's not going to benefit from 360 to 75 minutes. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's that's going to be more stress on her than anything, programming like 360-minute workouts in and just like not listening, like, no, you have to do this, like, no, like you have to structure the program around her lifestyle, and then we'll build on that, baby steps. One thing I actually wanted to talk about too, because what we're talking right now, lifting, strength, all this stuff, is very much, I guess, what you could say like Western fitness. And I know you and I also too, but you prescribe to Eastern fitness practices. So I know you're into Tai Chi and martial arts. I've done time in Muay Thai. I do yoga. My wife's a big yoga person. Um, but I thought it'd be an interesting point to kind of talk about the differences of Western versus Eastern fitness practices, because Western, what we do here in America, it's like tension, 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 get fucking jacked, get strong as all hell, um, versus, and it's very more extrinsically motivated, versus like Eastern fitness practices, what we kind of talk about, Tai Chi or martial arts or yoga. That's very much more geared towards increasing or improving someone's vitality. But I'd like to get your thoughts on just like Eastern fitness practices and why you do them, why you think they're important, everything around that.
Bruce Lee was always my idol growing up. I'll have to say, I'll have to
It's good.
start with that. So I think Bruce Lee, in one of his books, I forget which one. Oh, it's The Tao of Kung Fu. There's a
Mm.
whole section on his interpretation of Eastern versus Western fitness and like physical training. And he describes it really well. Obviously, the yin yang principle, tension, relaxation, is essential to just like the core philosophy of martial arts. Bruce Lee always says nothing can survive at either extreme, total relaxation or total tension. You need to be able to dance between them two.
Mm.
And he was describing how like the Western culture after he came to California from Hong Kong, he was like, you know, they're very much into weights and quantity and tension and looks and aesthetics and the ability to move a lot of mass, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look at the core philosophy of a lot of the physical development in martial arts, it's very much so based on the ability to control the breath, movement, and then the mind. So there's like a meditative aspect of it as well, but they start with trying to improve a lot of breath control and a lot of volume and body weight exposure to very like long isometrics, a lot of deep breathing. And then Bruce Lee really basically brought it down to like a fundamental ability to bring circulation and energy to the body, right? With
Mm.
like ease, calm strength. He calls it steel wrapped in cotton, right? And when he
Mm.
started actually doing strength training, when he came to California and started like seeing how boxers are like doing bicep curls and stuff, he was like, "This is amazing." Right? It actually creates so much more strength and power to what I already got. And I forget what book I was reading, but it was basically a physics strength training book, and it was like it boiled it down to the equation force equals mass times acceleration, right? And
Yep.
like the goal is ultimately to create force.
Sure.
The Western culture really, unless they're very brilliant strength coaches, which a lot of people are, but in general, like the general media really focuses on the M or the mass portion of that equation. It's like increasing the mass to create more force. Whereas like in the Eastern culture really looks at the ability to accelerate. And the
Mm.
ability to accelerate requires the ability to go from tension to relaxation very quickly in milliseconds. And the best athletes and the people who create the most force in the world are able to go from crazy tension to crazy relaxation in milliseconds, right?
Mm.
And so to your point, our hypervigilance in the Western culture towards tension, mass, and just more actually can sometimes interfere with the ability to produce more force because these people and I was one of them, didn't know how to fucking relax.
Yeah.
And so I could move a lot of mass, but I couldn't move quickly and I couldn't accelerate and I wasn't flexible and mobile. And in the Eastern culture, like they do not perseverate on one feat of physical performance without
Mm.
acknowledging what it can do to the other ones. Like it's okay to go through a strength program for 8 weeks, knowing that you're going to lose a little bit of flexibility, and that's okay, right?
Sure.
Because you can't make gains in every physical quality at once. You kind of, that's like the whole thing about macro cycles, right? After those
Yeah.
8 weeks, you can like chill out on the mass that you're lifting, right? Get in like a little mobility routine going, and then adopt like a power program or a power block that teaches you how to move quickly to optimize F equals MA, force equals mass times
Sure.
acceleration. And that program will help you extrapolate on the strength you built before, but now you're using your breath, you're using relaxation techniques to move more quickly, to create more force, and to be a
Hmm.
well-rounded human athlete, right?
Yeah.
So like studying Bruce Lee and studying the Eastern martial arts, it was like, for me, it was like, oh, I loved it because of the emphasis it put on these other qualities that can sometimes be lost in just pure Western culture.
That makes sense. That's interesting too, because
So to ready,
I
real quick. So to kind of
yeah
bring
go.
this full circle back to twerking, I know this is
It all
but
comes back to twerk.
can we twerk? Basically, can we express mobility flexibility. The the fitness cultures are very big on that. Can you move? Are you flexible? Do you have mobility? And then
Yeah.
next, like the ability to resist force, like just basic stability, core control, endurance first, right? And then being able to go back and forth between that relaxed, mobile, tense, can't move the person into strength and then bringing that all together. It's like you need that delicate dance between being able to twerk, resist the twerk, and then push, pull, lift, carry, do whatever force production you need. But like
Yeah.
you need that yin and yang to have that balance, right? It's like you can't like I
Yeah.
can't think any other way now that I've gone through like a traditional Western approach of strength conditioning, and now for the last like half decade, I've just been like, geeking out on martial arts.
Yeah. Yeah. um, yeah, I mean, that brings you around to that point of always like the answer is almost always it depends. Cause I mean, I think you remember my senior year, my senior project in our exercise physiology seminar with Dr. Day. I did a case study on my brother because he wanted to increase his vertical,
I
right?
remember that. Yeah.
And oftentimes, like I'll have people ask, like, how can I increase my vertical? And I'm always like, well, it really depends. Like, kind of like you just talked about, force equals MA, right? So take someone like me, for instance, or my brother, for instance, like we both have just naturally, like we're springy as all hell. I've always, even being a skinny dude, like I have springs in my legs. I can jump really fucking high.
Yes, you can.
But for me, the key to improving my already good vertical was the opposite end of the equation. I could already accelerate really well. I had to put force in, or
Yeah.
I had to get bigger and stronger, and then same thing. But like,
It's a
for
good.
instance, if you take someone who's like a natural power athlete or it's just strong as all hell, like they probably need to work on plyometrics and practice their jumping technique and work on that acceleration piece, right?
100%.
So that's an interesting because I've actually been, like I said, I did Muay Thai for a little bit years back. I was doing it for like about 7 or 8 months. I was doing it like once a week with the trainer. Fell off of it, but now since I'm looking to get back into it, I've been waiting for my back to get a little better, and I'm going to jump back into that too because it's just fun as all hell to do martial
It's
arts.
so fun.
Um, like I was saying, my avatar, the people I work with nowadays, tend to be either athletic parents or working professionals, and that's going to bring me around to kind of the next point. Because you are, how old is Lily now?
2.
So
She
you're a father of a
2 in August. So yeah, 2.
so you're a father of a 2-year-old, doing what you do for your career. But let's talk about your experience of being a dad and your core beliefs around family fitness.
Like family and fitness, you mean?
I guess both, right?
Family, yeah, family and fitness. Yeah, for me, I live by health and family first, and I definitely don't train as much as I used to anymore. But like, I now look at myself as like a a dad athlete. I
Yeah,
need to be able to run after Lily. She loves playing hide and go seek. She loves like sliding and getting on the ground and like, like just she just and it's like dad baby carries. It's a thing. Like
yeah,
when you're
yeah,
carrying like a 20, 25 pound toddler around and like you have to do things one handed cooking. I'm like, I'll cook a
yeah,
chicken in a cast iron steel and I got a baby in one hand. Like I just like now I train to be a dad, right? And
yeah,
I'm like I'll consistently train twice a week because that's all I really have right now. I'll make sure I walk a lot. I'll make sure I keep my step count legit. Um, I'll just make sure to make cleaner eating choices, and I plan like if I know I'm going to a place where I'm gonna have a lot of like of my favorite foods, I'll make sure I'll get my a decent protein intake like before that.
hmm
Get a lot of my good macronutrients before I go and know I'm gonna be exposed to splurging and like and just be able to enjoy it and be able to know that I'm hitting a lot of my health benefits and just starting with my identity of like I am now a dad who trains to be healthy, present, and around for my daughter versus a 20-year-old single dude trying to get ripped to pick up chicks at a bar. They're two
yeah.
totally different volume and load requirements. And so I
Yes, they
think
are.
starting with that perspective has really helped. For lack of a better term, take like that like comparisonitis and that like blaming, shaming, I should be doing more mindset off the table, and actually coming from this place where like I am doing enough and like I am
Hmm.
showing up as a dad and I am showing up as a therapist and I am showing up uh, as someone who sees themselves as a health and fitness enthusiast, right? And a lifelong learner.
Hmm.
I think there was a point of contention at one point where I was having what my therapist calls role strain, where I had just adopted a bunch of new roles, right? Like a business owner, a house owner, a dad, a someone who wanted to be a committed father and husband, right? And like there were certain times where I didn't feel like I was fulfilling, I couldn't fulfill those roles. And I was like
Mm.
I was like in this place where it was just like I felt like I had to give up something to be something else, and I didn't want to give up my health. I like would not want to do that, and I didn't want to give up my ability to be a father, and I didn't want to stop showing up as a business owner, right? And it was like I was putting
Yeah.
so much pressure on myself in so many different roles in my life, and I was starting to experience role strain. So I think
Mm.
knowing myself, self-awareness is step one, and like knowing the years that I've put into lifting in the gym and like committing to my passion, and knowing that for this next year or these next 2 years, if I just strength train twice a week and walk a lot and like do other fun things and like take care of my ability, my sauna, things that I enjoy doing, I know I'm going to be
Hmm.
okay, right? Like I can basically lower the standard on myself there because it's been so high for so long, take that pressure off. And actually what I've been seeing crazy results in like my strength, my mobility, my health, my sleep by actually taking that pressure off myself as a dad.
Interesting.
And so, yes, I have a therapist. I kind of threw that in there. I think mental health is huge.
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
is like, and just like when I got into these like points in my life after becoming a dad, um, I think perspective is everything. And that would, anytime someone asks me a question related to that of being a dad and like still fulfilling my fitness passion, that stuff always comes up because I think if you don't know, if you don't adopt an identity that allows you to actually look at your behaviors and like the things you're committing your time to, it's
Yeah.
really hard to be at peace with where you're at.
That makes sense. That's really good insight. And I'll be sharing
But
that one right there.
we'll see what happens
What's
when
that?
we'll see what happens when the second kid comes. I haven't dropped that publicly yet, so this is the first place it's public.
Oh shit. All right. Well, if I'm
Second
allowed
try,
to share it,
we're,
then I
we're,
will,
we're
or I
good.
can keep that to us.
Don't
um,
edit it out. Leave it in there, Nate.
all right, right on. Well, congratulations to you and Sam. Super
Thank
excited for you guys.
Thank
That's
you.
yeah, second one's coming, and then on top of that, I mean, I've seen the videos of you like at that, like, well, I don't know what the name of it is, but I always relate it to growing up Discovery Zone when we were
Oh
kids. I
yeah,
don't know if you're the
it's
DZ. Like I always see you at that indoor playground with her, like, and it's funny because like she'll be crawling, and then Mez is in there crawling with her, and
oh yeah,
it's
man.
super looks like fun as hell. Because yeah, I mean, it's obviously important, right? Um, do you know who Jonathan Goodman is?
I don't think so.
You probably recognize, but anyway, he's the guy I've been working. He runs the online trainer mentorship, and I've been working with his company for following him for a while. But
Hmm.
he had another tweet that was a tweet with regards to that was around. Um, I think it said something along the lines of like, "You would die for your kid. That's really noble, but would you get healthy for them?"
I love
And
that.
it's just like
Yep.
that's very thought provoking, kind of hard hitting, but it's the truth, right? Um, I was gonna talk a little bit about nutrition and diet philosophies. You touched on it a bit there. I know that's not necessarily your area of um, expertise, I guess. I know you have. I mean, I was with you in our exercise phys undergrad. We did quite a bit of like biochemistry and underlying nutrition science, but curious to get your thoughts on that. kind of how you handle that within your own life. If that comes up with your patients at all, patients and clients, but talk to me about that.
When it does, to be honest, when it does come up with my patient and clients, I usually refer out for that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
got my own nutrition coach a few years ago. It was really insightful to bring awareness around some of my eating habits and just checking some essential boxes off. So to keep our focus in when I work with clients on movement and on like physical stressors and
Yeah.
things like that, I usually refer out for that. And now that I know you're doing online nutrition coaching, I'll probably refer some people to you actually.
Hey, bring them my way. Yeah. It's interesting because I always get asked questions about nutrition. Um,
Well,
and like
weight loss is also one of your like that's your jam, right?
it is nowadays. Yeah, it's certainly become it. Sustainable weight loss. Because well, actually, this is going to bring up our next point, which I was going to get into in terms of like marketing within fitness and physical therapy. But yeah, with nutrition, it's like in college we took all the general nutrition, biochemistry. I went as far as taking biochemistry of lipids, like just a straight up semester learning about lipids and all
Nerd.
that. Yeah, I know, right? But and I think I told you about a year or two ago, I did the precision nutrition level 1 coach course, went through that. And it's tough to answer nutrition and diet questions unless I'm actually working with someone, because for the most part, like when you're talking nutrition, if someone's answer doesn't start with "it depends," they're likely full of shit. You know what I mean? Because there's just so much interplay and inter-individuality within nutrition that I tell everyone, they're like, what should I do? And I was like, honestly, my whole process with coaching nutrition is first and foremost, like you're going to do, like, I have a nutrition triage form, which is going to give me an idea of like your lifestyle, um, how much time you have available to you, all these different factors. And on top of that, I make my clients, it's like mandatory, do a 3-day food log when they first start with me, because once I get that information, then and only then can I like really highlight the areas of opportunity that you have and where we can implement different actionable habits. So it's a tough one to answer. I've subscribed by some universal principles, like, weight loss, weight gain, calories in, calories out, right? If you want to argue with that, argue with a physicist, because I can't, disprove the law of thermodynamics, right? Now, the complicated thing about it, it's simple in concept. It's, much harder in execution because there's all these different variables. So what I do with my clients is number one, try to get them to stop focusing on the things that they can't control, right? Your hormones, things like that, and focus on things you can control, like what's your caloric intake like, what's your expenditure like, what can we change, and if there are things going on outside of our control, hormones, thyroid, those things, then that's a conversation for your medical professional, not with me, because the endocrine system is way too complex for me to sit here and tell you what to do. You know what I mean?
Totally. 100%.
So that's a kind of my philosophy there, and it's a good segue because it's kind of what you were talking about there. Sustainable weight loss and brings you in kind of like the marketing within fitness and physical therapy, because I work in the fitness industry, and I have a lot of issues with some of the ways that things are marketed within the fitness industry. I have no problem with weight loss. I have a problem when you tell someone that they're going to lose 20 pounds in 4 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because A, it probably won't happen. B, if it does happen, they're probably not going to sustain it. So that's kind of like, that was a long-winded way of just bringing into marketing within fitness and physical therapy, because it's also an interesting dynamic where in this industry in particular, more so than other industries, it seems like sales and marketing is almost like taboo within the industry, which is like, you go into any other industry in the world, like that's just the way it is. Like every man makes his living from selling. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts about it.
Yeah, because I wrestle with this for a while and I'm better at it, but the pattern still comes up from time to time. So like not wanting to be
Hmm.
salesy, right? Um,
Sure.
you know, I think I've been diving into a lot of business courses in the last few years because this is definitely
Hmm.
not my expertise. And sales and marketing has been one of the main areas I've been studying and like just practicing. And I can actually relate a lot to like someone who's just first learning to like be in the gym and working out and like relate it to that practice, right? And like
Hmm.
mindset and intent really I'm learning matters a ton. And I think one of the biggest reasons why me personally I was scared to sell or ask for money is because I was the way I
Hmm.
was framing it. Like when I brought it up in therapy at one point, it was like my therapist kind of regurgitated what I said back to them. He was like, why do you see it as begging people for money?" And that's the word that I use.
Sure.
And he's like, "You're providing a really valuable online course." This is what I'm selling at the time. Um,
Hmm.
for other therapists and you've already been getting a lot of reviews about how quickly they were then able to help their patients with this specific problem that your course solves, right? And I wasn't really seeing it that way. It was like you're someone in front of you, especially if you have like qualifying criteria, who's having this problem, who identifies with these features, aka these are their issues, these are their dreams, there's these desires, these are their fears, these are their concerns, and you have all these boxes checked, and now you have something that solves that specific problem for them. You're literally doing them a disservice by not at least letting them know what your product is and what problems it solves, and letting them decide
Hmm.
if they want to buy. And so
Sure.
like, I had this fear. Quickly, for the people who don't know me, I am an Egyptian immigrant who just became a US citizen after 33 years of just not being a US citizen. And like I almost
Yeah.
got deported in 2018 by the Trump administration. And all throughout
Hmm.
my childhood, I didn't really feel like I belonged. And belonging is a really like fundamental need. And so
Sure.
that fear of rejection and that fear of not belonging, or that fear of someone saying no, I don't want to buy your course, or no, I don't want to exchange money for this really awesome thing that you're trying to provide me. There was a lot of fear around that, right? And I can't say what it is for other people, but for me it was the sale, like asking for the sale. There was a
Hmm.
lot of like fear of rejection and fear of no around that for me. And by working with
Hmm.
a therapist, just kind of bring this again all full circle, like, and he was just calling out some of my limiting beliefs around that. And yes, becoming a U.S. citizen really helped with that because, like, I now do belong here. Like, even though I had
Hmm.
all the data, my friends, my family, like, people were coming to me, paying me for PT services. Like, I had all the data to like, I belong here. I can ask for a
Yeah.
sale. There was still a lot
College degree.
yeah, so there was just so again, like, to bring up identity, to bring up fears and some of the insecurities from your past, whatever they may be. For me,
Yeah.
it was leaking. It was not just leaking, it was pouring into my ability to sell, market myself with confidence, give someone a confident response that, like, dude, if you're having this problem, like, I can help you solve it. Here's the
Yeah.
evidence, the proof, here's the testimonials, here's people that I've worked with, and not really pressuring anyone, and knowing that all behind all of that, people like you and me, and like people who resonate with our personalities, we're not the type of people that are going to make the sale and be like, gotcha. We're going to make the sale and
Yeah.
be like, all right, let's get to work. Like, now this is what you
Yeah.
need to do to get results, right? Like, now we have skin in the game, they have skin in the game. And what I've realized too is, like, people who pay attention. And in the
That's
past,
true.
oh, I'll give it to you for free, or I'll give it for you for this like really affordable price, whatever affordable means to them. And like, they don't see value of it, so we just devalue it until they can purchase it. A lot of these people just don't commit.
Yeah.
You know,
Um, that's, I mean, that's interesting because that's in
tangent.
this past year, I've gone through a big growth phase in my business, especially online coaching, and I've increased my price point pretty substantially.
Mhm.
Um, and what I found is the people who do commit to that high price point, especially if I tend to take payments up front. unless like I need to work out. But anyway, a situation for an individual. But either way, the more money they put up front, the more bought in they are and the more results they see. And I was having this discussion with another trainer, I don't know, a few weeks back, and he was talking about how he wants to do it. And I asked him like, what do you do? And he talked about like weight loss. And he's like, but I don't want to come off as like a used car salesman kind of thing, right? Salesy, right? And my first question is like, well, number one, dude, like, why are you equating fitness and sustainable weight loss to a used car? Because that comparison just doesn't make sense to me, right? It's and it's kind of that. It's a weird, like I said, it's weird. It's like only within the fitness industry that we have that concept. But I was like, are you?
No,
And again, I think what's
too.
that?
It's in physical therapy too.
Yeah, and part of it too is
universal.
I do think part of the issue, especially within fitness, I don't know as much physical therapy, but over the years, there's been a lot of distrust within the fitness industry and marketing because of disingenuous like timelines and unrealistic expectations. You know, we've all seen it. Get a bikini body in 2 weeks. Like, that's bullshit. Like, it takes you 3 weeks to even develop a habit, let alone have a big body transformation. So I think a lot of people have been burned in that aspect where they buy a program and it's those programs like, hey, $100, here's your program. Good luck. You know what I mean? And versus what I do now is like, I do a coaching program. Like, I'm with you every step of the way. And that's part of the reason I charge at a high price point. And then, whatever your result is, XYZ result, like, that's the question, is like, getting to that point, is that worth that money? If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, dude. And you've also put your reps in, right? Like, you've been in the industry for over a decade. You've had a lot of clients. And there's no way you would have, either one of us, there's no way we would have been comfortable charging what we charge now 10 years ago, right? So I think
absolutely
at the end of the day too, like, you need to have like the evidence, the time behind you to charge a certain price, for sure. Like, where you got to start where you're comfortable, but you got to build as your value increases. And then, like I said, I think if we don't address our own insecurities, they're going to pour into these things, because if you don't sell with confidence, people aren't going to be confident handing you a credit card. I've seen that so much. Like, I used to be like, well, yeah, well, like, you could buy this thing for me and then like we could work together for like 2 weeks. Or it's like, dude, if you really want to hammer this thing and solve this problem, like, commit for 2 months. Here are the 3 different price options. Like, I'm here if you need. Like, those are 2 totally different energies, right? And it's like, one exudes confidence and one was kind of like this immigrant who didn't belong here kind of thing. Right?
Yeah. Who did belong, but had this weird.
Yeah, exactly. But it was like, it's that mindset, right? It's that like identity that can just rob us of so much stuff.
So I mapped out 90 minutes here. It gives us about 15 minutes left here. Before we wrap up here, I did want to ask, as someone who has worked within, I think you worked in fitness too in the past, beyond strength and conditioning too, right? So you've worked in kind of all 3 spectrums: strength and conditioning, fitness, which obviously are somewhat blended together, and then physical therapy. What do you feel like are the big disconnects that you see between those industries?
The biggest disconnect that I see between those industries.
If you see any at all.
That's a really good question. There seems to be this disconnect between too little, too much, too much, too soon. So let me explain that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the fitness and strength and conditioning industries, a lot of times you can get the bros who are just the bro mentality of just like load them up, right? And then there's also this whole paradigm in the rehab industry where it's like, oh, address all the asymmetries and your posture's wrong and you're out of alignment and like blah 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 and like
you're dysfunctional.
Don't load it, and like these people aren't getting exposed to enough physical stress and stimulus to actually challenge the body enough, right? So it's like, it's trying to avoid being in either one of those conundrums. of like being afraid of any form of stress, any form of discomfort, because comfort and progress don't live on the same block. That was a quote from one of
Sure.
my teachers. I loved it. I adopted it. And then then it's just the, oh, like I just need to load it. It's like you said earlier with your story with the telehealth, is like she just asked you to not load it for a couple weeks, and that's exactly what you
Yeah.
needed. You know? So
Brings you
it's
back to the Bruce Lee yin and the yang, right? Right in between. You gotta live.
you
Yeah,
gotta live in between. You gotta be able to dance along the yin yang continuum.
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I thought you'd say. That's what I've always thought too. Is like you said that again. It depends. Like we keep saying, it depends on the person. You get someone who hasn't worked out in 10 years, and you throw them into you know a workout where they do a 10-minute lackluster warm up, and then you throw them into 45 minutes of high intensity interval training. Like that's probably not going to lead to good outcomes or a sustainable path for them to continue on. Like they're going to feel absolutely run down after that and be like, what the fuck? Why am I doing this? Like, you know what I mean? And then
Exactly.
on the opposite side of things, like the whole like, oh, you're dysfunctional, like, and that type of language, and I have a bad back, that type of stuff too. And that plays into it as well.
Yeah, and the
Um,
indirect communication sometimes from the rehab world, where it's like, if it hurts, stop. It's like that
yeah.
that actually is not accurate, right? It's like we have this whole traffic light system that we talk about now with patients as we progress them in strength conditioning. It's like there needs to be this like yellow green light area between like 0 and 6 out of 10 pain.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a little bit of discomfort within 24 to 48 hours after we spike some load and volume, and then that subsides within a day or two, and then the next time we do that same load and volume, it's actually less. Like we need that. If we don't have that, then we can't really get stronger. And so I think, in the rehab world, there's a big disconnect for a lot of them that don't have strength and fitness experience, and they're used to people who are very, shall I say, fragile mindset, where any form of discomfort is scary. So like having communication
Mm.
on that. And then on the fitness and strength conditioning side of things, sometimes there's a lot of fitness and strength conditioning professionals sometimes now that'll adopt a rehab approach to strength and conditioning. And like these people aren't sweating after their workout, right? And now,
Mm-hmm.
and then so there's that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it comes back down to the same principle, but like I think there's just this huge disconnect now between the fitness and rehab industries, where it's like we need to be able to better communicate to people around stress and pain and how that's required for like adaptability in either end of rehab and
Yeah.
fitness continuum.
Yeah. And kind of that concept of like, don't train through the pain, but there's always a way to train around the pain, right?
Yeah, and then is that level of pain, is that acceptable, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
if it's like a 4 or 5 out of 10, and we just like kind of challenge you the day before, and then the day
Yeah.
after that, it's like it's down to a 2 or a 3, I'm gonna be like, what's the problem? And
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Like
next
my
day,
hamstrings are sore.
0 or 1, yeah, okay, what's the problem? It's cool, all right. Like
Yeah.
we don't need to immediately go into panic mode. Let's monitor the
Yeah.
symptoms,
Yeah.
see how it responds in the next few days. We know how much you did, and we're just trying to find that minimum effective dose, right?
Yeah. My hamstrings are really sore. Well, we did RDLs yesterday, so that makes sense. Like, talk to me tomorrow how they feel. They're a little better. All right.
And that's
That
yeah,
makes sense.
it's a really important way of communicating with someone who's been in chronic pain, honestly, and like now wants to start
Sure.
a journey because they have a really negative
Mm,
experience with discomfort around their muscles and joints.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, it's like, well, yeah, no one wants to be told they're broken. No one wants to feel that way. I remember talking about my cousin who she had 2 back surgery before she was 20,
oh,
and like dealing with that and how challenging that can be. And when I worked with her, my whole thing was like, we're going to get you moving. We're not going to treat you like you're broken. We're going to make sure we do things carefully and make sure that we don't exacerbate things, but I'm not going to treat you like you're a broken record. You know what I mean?
yeah,
We're going to get you going here. So,
let's
dude, this was fun. I'm really glad we did this.
let's do it
I
again
guess you could
soon.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to get Jeff on here and talk to him about physical therapy and golf because he's into that. The cool thing about obviously being an exercise physiology major is I have like a pretty broad network of physical therapists that I can work with. And obviously throughout my career, met some people along the way. I'll probably get some clients on here, but I was going to summarize the key points of the discussion, but there's been a lot.
First key point is be able to twerk. That's number one.
First and foremost, make sure that you can twerk. And that goes for everyone.
And then
men,
be able
women.
to twerk along the yin-yang continuum. I think that sums it up well.
If you're starting out, don't go too crazy. If you've been doing it a while, challenge yourself, you know?
Yep.
And it depends, you know?
And then be able to anti-twerk.
Yeah, exactly. Anti-twerk as well.
The limbs, push, pull, lift, carry.
Be able to resist the twerk. So those are your actionable tips and steps from this audience. But beyond that, always keep in mind with any of this stuff, exercise, nutrition. If someone's answer doesn't start with "it depends" for the most part, and they just have a black and white answer, likely they're full of crap. They're not looking at all the data. Keep that in mind. And then the point I always drive home with any of my clients is like consistency and making small changes. The first changes you should make should be the easiest ones to make, and you should be able to do them well and consistently, and then you build on that. And I imagine you probably feel the same way about all of your rehab patients. I actually was talking to someone about my rehab experience with my ankle with you years ago, and how quickly I progressed and how shocked you were. And it's just like, it's interesting, like this exercise stuff, like if you do it consistently and you do it every day and do the stuff you need to, like it can add up pretty quickly, you know?
100%. Well, and you were, no surprise, you were super diligent.
Yeah. That was also a part. It was COVID. So I was just stuck in the little studio I was living in San Diego. So I had nothing else to do except exercise and train. So that helped.
Hone your craft.
Yeah, exactly. Give you your chance here to drop your plugs, your socials, your course, anything you want, dude.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Spine PT University, or website spineptuniversity.com. Just rebranded, so I had to think about that one for a second. And that's my continuing education business online for physical therapists. So if you're a clinician, healthcare professional, that's where you can come nerd out, and offering low back pain online course right now, do-it-yourself course. And then we run a group coaching program. We're going to run it twice next year, so you can always get on the wait list for that. And then I see patients, if you're local, through Barbell Therapy and Performance. You can find all that stuff on my Instagram profile. And that's pretty much it. That's where you can find me.
Right on. And you are in the South New Jersey, Philadelphia area, correct?
Yes, I am. So now the Eagles are doing pretty well. The Phillies did well until what just happened recently. And it's weird because I was in New England for my entire life, and like New England Patriots were crushing it. They're unfortunately not doing too well right now, but like the Eagles are crushing it now, and it's cool to live in a city and see these football teams crushing it at their prime. You know, so
hey man, we had a good 20-year run.
Yeah, dude, we definitely. So. That's gonna make some people sour from Boston and New York, but that's okay. Boston.
Hey, nothing lasts forever in this life, and it was bound to happen at some point. So, Bez, I love you, bro. This was super fun.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Let's do this again soon.
We'll do it again. All right. To the listeners, thanks for tuning in to the first ever podcast here, and hopefully first of many. Talk soon.